In a 1940s Quebec hayloft, the dustman's day is yours, and the first pale light finds you under the rafters, where last summer's hay still holds the smell of sun. Settle in now, and let the work move at its own slow pace. We are only here to follow the quiet round, one breath at a time, while the barn wakes below you, and the boards answer softly beneath your boots. The loft is dim at first, with blue morning pressed against the cracks in the gable door, and the air feels cool enough to touch. You stand beside the stacked hay, your hand resting on a wooden fork polished smooth by years of palms, and the dust waits in every folded corner. In 1940s Quebec, this is not work that calls attention to itself. It gathers slowly, like frost on a window, and you meet it with patience. Below you the cows shift in their stalls, chains giving small metal notes in the half-dark. A pail knocks once against a manger, and somewhere near the milk room, someone clears their throat in that careful morning way. You can smell warm animals, dry hay, cold boards, and the faint sourness of last night's silage drifting from the far end of the barn. The hayloft dustman begins before the farm is fully awake, because dust is easiest to see when light comes low and sideways. You pull your cap down and tie a folded cloth loosely over your mouth, not as a grand precaution, but as part of the habit. Your fingers know the knot. Your shoulders know the weight of the coat. The cloth smells faintly of soap, wood smoke, and the pocket where it spent the night. And when you breathe through it, the barn becomes a little softer around the edges. The first task is always to look. You don't rush into sweeping, because a loft has its own memory, and you need to read it before you disturb it. Along the beams, old chaff has gathered in pale drifts, light as ground paper. In the cracks between planks, seed husks sit in narrow lines, and near the hay door, where loads came in during July, the dust lies thicker and more golden. We can take our time here, because this work belongs to slow noticing. You see where the last forkfuls were tossed. You see where boots crossed again and again through autumn. You see the faint path to the hay chute, pressed down by months of feeding, and you know that every mark in the loft came from someone keeping animals fed, through weather that didn't ask permission. The broom leans where you left it, near a post darkened by hands and rope. It is a wide broom, stiff with wear, made for boards rather than parlor floors, and when you lift it, a few bits of straw fall away with a soft scratching sound. The handle is cool, the bristles smell of dust and old grass. You place it against the floor and begin with a short pull, just enough to loosen the top layer. Dust rises in a low cloud, and morning light catches it. For a moment, it looks almost still, each speck turning slowly in the beam that enters through a split in the wall. You pause, not because the work is hard, but because the loft asks you to move with care. If you sweep too sharply, the air fills too fast. If you take small strokes, the dust travels where you want it to go. The hayloft dustman's day in Quebec is made from these small judgments. A push here, a pause there, a step back from the chute before brushing the edge. You guide the sweepings into soft ridges, straw ends and seed dust, and broken leaves gathering together, and the sound is a dry whisper moving over wood. By now the barn has taken on more shape. The rafters show their grey grain. The iron hook near the pulley glints once as daylight reaches it. Outside, a sleigh runner or wagon wheel may pass on the road, depending on the season, but up here the hour remains sheltered and close. You hear the farm through boards and beams, as if the whole building is breathing below your feet. In winter, the hayloft feels like a room built out of cold air and stored summer. Your breath clouds lightly against the cloth, and the tips of your fingers wake slowly inside wool gloves. In spring, dampness creeps into the walls, and the dust clings more stubbornly to the boards. In late summer, after haying, everything smells sharper and greener, and the dustman finds the loft newly filled, newly restless, newly needing order. You work along the wall first, because edges collect what the middle forgets. The broom reaches beneath the lower slope of stacked hay, and the bristles bring out fine brown powder, broken clover heads, bits of timothy, and the occasional lost nail gone dull with age. You bend carefully and pick such things up by hand. A nail in a loft is never just a nail. It is something to remove before a boot finds it. There is a quiet thrift in the way you handle the sweepings. Clean hay fragments can go to bedding. Coarser straw can be carried down for the stalls. Fine dust and spoiled scraps are kept apart because every farm in 1940s Quebec knows the difference between waste and use. Nothing is named too grandly. You simply sort what your hands find. Near the hay chute, you use a smaller brush. Its handle is shorter, and the bristles are worn unevenly at one corner, but it reaches where the wide broom cannot. You brush the lip of the opening, the squared edges of the chute, the place where hay drops through to the manger below. Each stroke sends a faint smell upward, dry and sweet, like a field remembered through cloth. Someone below calls your name, but not loudly. The voice comes through the chute, rounded by wood, asking whether the first forkful is ready. You answer in the same quiet tone, and your words seem to settle into the hay. Then you use the fork to loosen a section from the stack, lifting and shaking it just enough to free the dust before feeding begins. This shaking is a small art. Too much, and the hay scatters. Too little, and the dust rides down with it. You lift the fork, let the stems open, and give them a soft turn in the air. Chaff falls like dull gold against the boards, and the hay itself keeps its long shape, fragrant and dry, ready for the animals waiting below. As the morning grows steadier, the dustman's work folds into the feeding round. You are not separate from the farm's other movements. You are part of the same patient machine of hands, pails, breath, and boards. The cows need hay, the stalls need bedding, the loft needs clearing, and your day moves among those needs without much ceremony. There is comfort in such order. You know where the fork rests when both hands are needed. You know which plank gives a hollow note near the north wall. You know that the best light for seeing fine dust comes after sunrise, but before the loft warms, when each beam from the gable makes a visible path across the air. We stay with that light for a while. It lies across your sleeve, over the broom handle, over the gentle slope of hay packed to the rafters. It catches the floating pieces your sweeping has lifted, and they drift downward so slowly that watching them feels like a kind of rest. Even while you work, part of you is simply keeping company with the barn. The old barns of rural Quebec hold sound differently from newer buildings. Their boards creak with a soft patience, and their beams, often squared by hand or cut in small mills, seem to carry the weight of many winters without complaint. You feel that steadiness through your boots. When the wind moves outside, the loft answers with a low wooden murmur. Sometimes the dustman works alone for an hour or more. That loneliness is not empty. It has small companions. A sparrow clicks somewhere near the eaves. A leather strap swings faintly from a peg. A loose strand of hay touches your wrist as you pass, and for a moment it feels like the field itself has reached into the loft. You gather the first pile into a shallow wooden box. The box was once used for apples, or perhaps for kindling, and one side bears an old stamped mark, faded almost beyond reading. You don't need to read it. You know its size by feel, and you know how much sweepings it can hold before the corners spill. The dust is not all the same. Some of it is grey, from the boards and beams. Some is tan, from dry grass. Some has the darker flecks of old leaves and barn soil carried up on boots. When you lift the box, the fine layer on top trembles, and a warm smell rises, not unpleasant, only close and old like the inside of a drawer kept shut for years. At the loft door, you pause before tipping anything away. The door opens outward from the gable, and its hinges resist at first, then give with a long familiar creak. Morning reaches in fully now. You see the yard below, pale with frost or damp with thaw, and beyond it the fields lie quiet under whatever season has been given to them. If it is January, snow has banked against the stone foundation, and the world outside is blue-white and still. If it is May, the yard smells of mud, manure, and wet bark, and the first green appears along the fence line. If it is September, the fields are stubbled, the air is sharper, and the hayloft in Quebec feels newly rich with all the summer stored under its roof. You empty the box where it belongs, not in a careless scatter, but in the place set aside for what can't be used. The dust falls without drama. A little of it lifts again, then settles on the ground, and you step back from the door with the quiet satisfaction of one small corner made clear. The day has barely begun, yet already the loft is easier to breathe. When you return to the stack, the light has moved. It has climbed the hay and found old spider silk stretched between two rafters. You notice such things because dust work teaches the eye to value small signs. A web tells you where air moves. A clean patch tells you where a hand brushed yesterday. A darker place in the hay tells you where damp once tried to enter. You take the hay knife from its nail when a compacted edge needs trimming. It is not used every morning, but when the stack has settled hard, the blade helps open a clean face. The handle is thick, worn darker at the grip, and the metal has a dull, honest sheen. You press it down through the hay with measured force, hearing the stems give way in a soft crunch. The cut surface smells brighter. It releases summer more directly, clover and grass and a faint sweetness that seems almost golden. You lean close enough to feel the hay brush your sleeve, and for a moment the cold loft is full of July. We can let that moment linger, because this is one of the small gifts of the dustman's day, the stored season waking under your hand. There is no need to hurry the blade back onto its nail. You wipe it with a scrap of sacking first, clearing the cling of dust from the edge. The sacking is rough against your fingers. It has the smell of grain and barn shelves. Then the knife goes back where it belongs, and the nail receives its weight with a soft tap. Order matters in a loft, though no one may praise it aloud. Tools left in clear places are found in dim weather. Chutes brushed clean do not clog. Loose dust moved before it deepens does not become a grey skin over every surface. You learn these things without lectures, because the barn teaches them through repetition. By mid-morning, the first warmth enters the loft. It may be only a slight softening of the air, but you feel it at your neck and wrists. The boards no longer hold the night's cold quite so firmly. Down below, milking has ended, and the sounds change from metal pails and animal movement to the smaller noises of washing, scraping, and doors being latched. This is when you often sweep the central path. It runs from the ladder or stairs to the hay chute, then toward the gable door where loads were brought in. The path has been pressed by boots, sledged by dragging bundles, and crossed in darkness more times than anyone counts. You place the broom at one end and draw the dust toward you in long, patient strokes. Each stroke has a beginning, a middle, and a soft end. The bristles rasp, lift, and settle. Your arms find the distance without thinking. You do not force the broom. You let the boards guide it, following their slight unevenness, feeling where a nail head rises and where a crack catches seed husks in a stubborn little line. A dustman in a 1940s QUEBEC Hayloft learns that floors are never flat in the way a person imagines. They rise and dip with age. They remember. They remember weight. The broom tells you this through your hands, and the longer you work, the more the loft becomes a map of small pressures and gentle resistance. The first pause of the day comes without ceremony. You set the broom against a beam and sit on a low edge of stacked hay, choosing a place firm enough to hold you. From a coat pocket, you take bread wrapped in cloth, perhaps with a bit of cheese, perhaps with cold pork, perhaps only butter if the morning is lean. The food tastes of the room. You eat slowly because the loft asks for quiet chewing and small movements. Crumbs fall onto your palm, a little hay dust clings to your cuff. The cheese is cool, the bread dense, and the cloth on your lap carries the smell of home, stove heat, and yesterday's kitchen. We sit with you here for a moment, not adding anything, just listening. Outside, Quebec's farm roads carry the soft evidence of the decade. A truck may pass now and then, still uncommon enough to be noticed. Horses remain part of the rhythm on many farms, and their harness bells, when they sound in winter, come through the walls like small pieces of light. The war years and the years after them have changed some things, but the loft keeps its older pace. You may have an electric bulb by the stairs, or you may still rely on lantern light before dawn. You may hear a radio downstairs in the kitchen, faint through the house wall, speaking news or weather in French, English, or both, depending on the farm and parish. Yet up here, among beams and hay, the main language is still touch, breath, wood, and work. After the bread is folded away, you check the corners near the eaves. These places are low and awkward. You bend at the waist, then crouch, holding the smaller brush and moving slowly so your head does not meet a beam. The air is colder there. It smells of dry wood and old nesting straw. Your sleeve brushes rough planks and the sound is close to your ear. The dust here is finer because no boots disturb it often. It lies quietly on ledges, on the top of a beam, on the inward slant of the roof boards. You brush it down in careful strokes, not trying to make the old barn new, only helping it stay clear enough for another day. That is the measure of the job. Not perfection, usefulness. Sometimes you find things left from other seasons, a bit of twine, a broken clothespin, a button darkened by dust, a short length of rope stiff with age. You turn each thing in your hand before deciding where it belongs, and for a few seconds the object seems to hold the person who lost it, though their name may have passed out of memory. There is tenderness in that kind of finding. The Hayloft Dustman does not work among grand records, but among small traces. Every farm keeps an archive of ordinary things. A boot scrape in the dust, a child-sized mitten tucked near a beam, a penciled mark on a post showing how high hay was stacked during a good year. We read it gently, because nothing here asks to be shouted. As the morning wears on, the work shifts from clearing dust to preparing the loft for the next feeding and the next load of chores below. You smooth the face of the haystack with the back of the fork, so loose stems don't fall across the path. You rake the edge of the pile into order. You make sure the chute has enough clear space around it for quick, easy work later. The fork feels different from the broom. It has more length, more reach, and a firmer answer in the hand. Its tines slide into hay with a sound like cloth tearing very softly. When you lift, the weight gathers at the end, and your shoulders take it with the practiced economy of someone who has lifted the same kind of burden many times. You don't think of it as technique, though it is. One foot steadies, one hand guides, the other hand takes the load. Your back bends only as much as needed, and the fork turns at the right height so the hay falls where you mean it to fall. Repetition has made the movement plain, and plain movement can be deeply restful to watch and to feel. In the 1940s, many Quebec farms are still held together by this knowledge of bodies and tools. A task is learned by doing it beside someone older until the motion enters your wrists. Words help a little, but not as much as mornings do. The broom, the fork, the box, the ladder, the chute, and the door all become part of one long sentence the day keeps speaking. Near noon, the loft grows brighter and less secret. Light enters through gaps in the boards and makes pale bars across the floor. Dust still floats, but now it is thinner, softened by the work already done. You can see the swept path clearly. You can see where the corners have been cleared, where the hay face has been trimmed, and where the tools are standing in their proper places. That sight brings a quiet ease. Not pride exactly, though there is some of that. More a sense that the world has been set back into a shape you understand. The animals below have feed. The loft can be crossed without stirring too much dust. The next person who climbs the stairs will find the way ready. The noon meal waits somewhere beyond the barn, but before you go down, you stand still and listen. A cow exhales below. A chain slides once against wood. A door closes in the yard. Farther away, perhaps, a church bell marks the hour from the village, softened by fields and weather, until it reaches you as more feeling than sound. You take the broom in hand for one last pass before dinner. This is not the heavy sweeping from dawn. It is a finishing pass, light and almost meditative, gathering what your earlier work loosened and what feeding has dropped. The broom moves in arcs. The dust follows. Your boots leave clear prints for a moment, then the air settles around them. When you descend, the ladder rungs or stair treads feel familiar beneath your soles. Your hand slides along a rail polished by years of use. The smell changes with each step, from dry loft hay to warmer animal breath, damp straw, iron, milk, and the sharper scent of manure. The barn floor receives you with a different kind of sound, heavier and more enclosed. But even at the table, the loft remains with you. A pale line of dust may sit on your sleeve. A bit of hay may cling to your trouser cuff. When you lift a cup, you may smell the barn faintly on your hands, even after washing, and there is no shame in that. It is simply the mark of the morning's work. The meal is plain and welcome. Soup, bread, potatoes, tea, perhaps beans or meat if the day allows it. You sit near a stove if the season is cold, and the heat reaches your knees first. Talk moves slowly, about weather, feed, a neighbor's field, a road becoming soft with thaw, or a machine part that needs attention. The dustman's work is not made into a story, it is just part of the day. That quiet lack of drama is part of its comfort. Some jobs announce themselves with noise. This one leaves evidence in clearer boards, easier breathing, and the small order of tools placed back where hands can find them. We notice it because we have climbed the stairs with you, and because the ordinary has a way of becoming beautiful when we stay with it long enough. After the noon meal, the light has changed again, and the hayloft is no longer blue or gold, but a fuller, steadier grey-brown. You climb back into the Quebec barn with a slower body, carrying the heaviness that comes after warm food and indoor air. The loft smells stronger now because the day has warmed the hay. It is sweet, dry, and faintly dusty with a hidden trace of summer rain. The afternoon work begins with sacks. They are old feed sacks, patched and used again because cloth has a long life on a careful farm. You shake one open, and it gives a soft snap. The inside smells of grain dust and burlap. It seems rough beneath your fingers, and when you set it beside the sweepings box, it slumps in a tired, useful way. Some dust and chaff can be gathered for bedding in small amounts, mixed where it will do no harm and add softness beneath straw. Some is too fine and must be carried away. You know the difference by color, smell, and feel. Good dry chaff has a clean grass scent and a little spring under the hand. Spoiled dust feels duller, darker and faintly sour. You sort without making a show of it. The usable pieces go into one sack. The sweepings fit for removal go into another. A few longer stems are tossed back toward the haystack. Your hands move steadily, and the loft answers with small sounds. The slide of burlap, the hush of chaff, the tap of a wooden box against the floor. This sorting is one of the forgotten parts of the Hayloft dustman's day. It doesn't photograph well. It doesn't become a tale told in town. Yet it matters to the smooth running of the farm, because a clean loft preserves feed, protects tools, and keeps the working path ready through dark mornings when every minute before milking feels borrowed from sleep. We keep close to the hands, because that is where the work lives. The thumb pressing a sack mouth open, the fingers pinching out a bit of wire, the palm brushing dust from a beam, the wrist turning the broom at the end of a stroke. These small movements hold more knowledge than they first appear to hold. By early afternoon, a mild quiet settles over the barn. Animals rest after feeding. The yard is less busy. Even the boards seem to creak less often. You work near the gable door again, where the summer hay once entered in loads, lifted or pitched from wagons, filling the loft with heat, noise and green scent. Now only the memory of that rush remains. The door frame needs brushing. Dust gathers along its sill, thickened by drafts. You open the door just enough to let air move through, and the loft stirs around you. Outside air touches your face, carrying snow, rain, mud, or sun, depending on the month. Inside, loose hay trembles slightly, and the smallest pieces lift and drift toward the light. You use the brush on the sill, then the broom across the boards just inside. The sound changes near the open door. It becomes brighter, less muffled. You can hear a distant dog, a wagon tongue, an axe on wood, or the low engine note of a truck climbing the road. All of it comes to you softened by height and distance. In Quebec's farming parishes of the 1940s, a barn loft is a place between worlds. Below is animal warmth and daily need. Outside is weather, road, field and village. Up here is stored grass, patient dust, and the slow labor of keeping things usable. You stand in that middle place, with one hand on the broom, and the day opens around you without hurry. The sack fills slowly. You do not tamp it hard, because fine dust rises when pressed. You let it settle by its own weight, then fold the top over and tie it with twine. The knot is simple. It has been tied on feed sacks, bundles, gates, and broken handles for as long as you can remember. Your fingers make it almost without asking you. Then comes the carry-down. A sack of chaff is not heavy like grain, but it is awkward, soft and shifting against the hip. You lift it carefully, keeping the dusty side away from your face. As you descend, the sack brushes the rail, and small pieces cling to the worn wood. The barn air thickens below, warm and earthy. You set the sack where it belongs, perhaps near the bedding, perhaps near a corner marked for removal later. No one stops to admire the act. That is all right. Much useful work is like this, folded into the day so completely that people only notice it when it is left undone. The dustman understands that kind of invisibility, and there is a humble peace in it. Back in the loft, the afternoon is waiting. The floor looks clearer now, but not empty. A hayloft is never empty while it is alive with use. Dust will return, chaff will fall, boots will track new lines. The task is not to defeat this, but to keep company with it, to meet the returning disorder with returning care. And as the light begins its slow lean toward evening, the work turns to the places most easily forgotten. The back beam, the far corner, the top of the low partition where old hay dust rests in a long grey stripe. You take the smaller brush again, and the day narrows into reach, touch, and breath, while the Quebec barn holds its steady warmth around you. The back beam asks for the most patient hand, because its surface is rougher than the floor and catches the fine dust like wool catches burrs. You stand on the balls of your feet, reaching just high enough, and draw the brush toward you in gentle strokes. The dust comes away slowly, grey at first, then tan, where hay has rubbed against the wood. It falls onto the boards without sound, except for the faintest dry sigh. You gather that dust with the broom before it spreads. The light through the boards is lower now, angled toward your hands, and every motion seems slower inside it. We can feel the day lengthening around you, not in a hurried way, but in the way a barn remembers the sun. Your shoulders have warmed from work, and the cloth at your throat has loosened. The loft smells of hay, old pine, and the soft bitterness of brushed-down dust. In the far corner, a little heap of chaff has settled behind a crate. The crate once held bottles or nails, or perhaps jars carried up for storage and forgotten, and its slats are dry enough to sound hollow when you move it. You lift it carefully with both hands. A pale rectangle remains beneath it, cleaner than the boards around it, and the sight is strangely pleasing. It shows where time has been waiting. You sweep around that pale mark, not trying to erase it. Some marks belong to the loft. They are part of its quiet record. As the dustman's day moves on in this 1940s Quebec barn, you learn which signs should be cleared and which should be left alone. A heap of chaff must go. A clean square beneath an old crate can stay as a little memory of weight. There is a softness to the afternoon that makes each sound distinct. The brush against the beam, the broom across the floor, your boot settling on a plank, a cow shifting below, then stillness again. If someone passes outside, the voice arrives blurred by wall and weather, and you may not catch the words. You only hear the human shape of them, and that is enough. You take the crate to a better place, nearer the wall, but not pressed into the corner. This is how order grows in a hayloft, by small changes that make tomorrow easier. You leave space for the broom. You leave space for air. You leave space for a hand to reach behind without knocking its knuckles against the wood. The work is humble, but it has its own quiet intelligence. Now the shaft of the fork needs wiping. Dust gathers at the metal collar, where wood meets iron, and if left too long it turns into a small hard ring. You hold the fork across your knees and rub it with a piece of coarse cloth. The handle is warm from the loft air, smooth along the places where many palms have passed. Near the end, a splinter rises, and you feel it before you see it. You do not ignore such things. A splinter today becomes a sore hand tomorrow. From a pocket or a shelf, you take a small knife and shave the rough place down with careful thin cuts. The wood curls away in pale ribbons, smelling fresher than the old handle around it. You run your thumb along the grain again. It is not perfect, but it is safe and serviceable, which is often enough. The dustman in a Quebec hayloft tends tools almost as often as he tends dust, though the tending is quiet and brief. A broom must stand bristles up or hang where air can reach it. A fork must not be left underfoot. A hay knife must be wiped, and sacks must be shaken outside when weather permits. These rules are not written anywhere. They live in habit. You place the fork back against the beam, and it settles into its usual angle. That angle matters. If the handle leans too far, it slips. If it stands too straight, it waits like an obstacle. You know the exact position through long use, the way a person knows where to place a cup in the dark. Such knowledge doesn't make a sound, but it makes the day gentler. The afternoon round brings you toward the ladder opening. Dust gathers there, because every climb carries a little of the lower barn upward, and every descent carries a little of the loft down. You kneel beside the opening and brush the edges, keeping your weight balanced on the firm boards. The ladder below smells faintly damp, touched by hands, boots, and animal warmth. Its top rung shines in the middle. You wipe that rung with your cloth. It is a small courtesy to whoever climbs next. Maybe that person is you before dawn. Maybe it is someone carrying a lantern with one hand full and the other reaching in the dark. The cleared rung will not be noticed, but it will be felt. We stay with that thought for a moment, because much of the dustman's work belongs to the body before it belongs to the eye. You can hear wind now, low along the roof. It moves differently depending on the season. In winter, it presses at the boards with a dry, cold insistence. In summer, it slips through cracks and carries the smell of leaves, manure, road dust, and distant water. In autumn, it tastes faintly of frost. Inside the hayloft, the wind is never fully outside. It enters as a narrow breath. Where wind enters, dust gathers. You follow the thin lines beneath the wall cracks and brush them inward, away from the edge where damp may find them. Hay dust that stays dry is merely dust. Hay dust that lies damp too long becomes heavier, darker, less pleasant in the hand. You have learned this through seasons, by smell first, then by sight. A darker patch near the north wall draws your attention. You crouch and touch it lightly, then bring your fingers close enough to smell. It is dry today, only older and more compacted than the dust around it. Still, you brush it clear and look at the board beneath. No soft place, no fresh damp, only the old stain of some past weather. The barn has kept itself well enough. We don't hurry away from these little inspections. They are part of using your days wisely in the Quebec loft. A dustman is not only sweeping what lies plainly before him. You are noticing what might make tomorrow's work harder, then answering it before it becomes trouble. A little air, a little clearing, a board watched carefully. That is the whole method, and it asks for calm attention. At times someone below opens the stable door, and a brighter sound rises. Hooves shift on bedding. A voice murmurs to an animal. Cold or warm air moves through the barn, and the loft responds with a faint shiver of loose hay ends. You pause until the air settles again, because sweeping during a draft only sends dust wandering. This patience is practical, not decorative. The barn rewards it. When the draft has passed, you return to the central pile. It is smaller now, made of the afternoon's work, and its color is mixed from every corner you have touched. You slide the broom behind it and draw it toward the box. The bristles leave faint trails. The pile folds over itself, light and quiet, and you can hear single straw pieces ticking softly against the wood. Your hands are dusty inside the gloves. When you remove one glove for a moment, your palm is lined with pale powder, caught in the creases. You rub thumb against fingertip and feel the fine grit there. It is soft, almost silky, yet dry enough to remind you of threshing floors and old sacks. You put the glove back on before the chill reaches too deeply. The day of a hayloft dustman is made from textures: rough burlap, smooth fork handle, splintered crate edge, soft hay head, cold hinge, dust as fine as flour. You do not name them all while working, but your hands know them in order. They are like the quiet words of a language learned without schooling. By later afternoon, the animals below begin to stir toward their next feeding. The calm changes shape, becoming expectant. You hear a chain drawn through a ring, the hollow knock of a manger, the soft clatter of a pail set down. Those sounds rise through the chute and find you standing at the hay face again, ready to loosen what will be needed. Before feeding, you clear the area around the chute one more time. This is a practical kind of tidiness, because loose sweepings near the opening can fall with the hay. You brush the boards clean, then stand with the fork planted lightly beside your boot. The haystack rises shoulder high and higher, pressed by its own weight, scented with dried grass and a faint peppery note from clover leaves. You choose a section that will come away cleanly. The fork enters. The stems resist, then release. You lift, shake once, wait for the chaff to fall, and turn the fork toward the chute. The hay drops with a muffled rush, and below you hear it land. Someone may spread it by hand in the manger, and the animals begin their low, steady eating. There is something restful in that sound. Cows eating hay make a slow, tearing murmur, patient and untroubled. From above, you hear it through wood, softened by distance, and it becomes part of the evening rhythm. Your work has prepared this sound. The cleared chute, the loosened hay, the dust shaken away, all of it leads to that quiet feeding below. The QUEBEC Hayloft Dustman is often known by other names on the farm: hand, brother, son, neighbor, hired man, uncle. The word dustman simply gives shape to this particular part of the day, the part spent keeping the loft clear and usable. In truth, you move from task to task as needed, because farm work rarely respects one title for very long. Still, there are days when the loft is your main country. After haying, after a week of dry wind, after winter feeding has worn paths through the stored stacks, then your hours belong to the rafters, the floorboards, the broom, and the small floating world that appears whenever light catches the air. You do not conquer it, you accompany it. As the evening feeding settles, you check the hay supply nearest the chute. You pull the loose edge back from the walking path and tuck it into the stack. You brush chaff away from your boots. You pick up 2 strands of baling twine, though in some barns loose hay rather than bales still shapes the whole loft. The details shift from farm to farm, but the habit of order remains. In many Quebec barns of the 1940s, hay may have been stored loose, pitched in with forks and tramped down by feet, though bales were becoming more common in some places. You know your own barn by its smell and shape. Loose hay settles like a hillside under the roof. Bales stack with squared shadows and narrow lanes between them. Dust finds both, patient as weather. If the hay is loose, your fork work is broad and flowing. If the hay is baled, your hands spend more time on twine, edges, and fallen flakes. Either way, the dustman follows the same principle. Keep the path clear, keep the feed clean, keep the corners watched. Let air move where air must move. Carry away what no longer serves the work. Evening light makes the loft kinder to the eye. It softens the grey boards and warms the exposed ends of hay stems. Your own shadow stretches across the floor, bending over uneven planks and disappearing under the stack. When you move, the shadow moves with you, slow and broad, and for a moment you seem to have another quiet worker keeping pace. You take the broom again. The evening pass is lighter than the morning one, but it matters. Feeding has scattered chaff. Your own steps have stirred dust from the beamwork. A little hay has fallen near the ladder. You gather it all toward the same central place, and the loft returns to its prepared breathing order. We can feel how the repetition has changed the day. At dawn, the work was about waking the space, clearing what the night had held. At noon, It was about sorting and making use of what could still serve. Now, toward evening, it is about setting things down gently, so darkness finds the loft in a reasonable state. The same broom does all three kinds of work. Your body knows the difference between morning energy and evening steadiness. In the morning, each movement begins from cool stiffness. By afternoon, the arms swing more easily. By evening, the movements grow quieter, not weak, but economical, as if the body has remembered exactly how much effort each task deserves. That kind of knowledge is peaceful. The floor near the gable door has one stubborn crack. Seed husks gather there in a narrow, dark line. You use the corner of the broom, then the smaller brush, and finally the back of the knife, gently, so you do not scar the board. The husks come free in a little curl. You sweep them into your palm and drop them into the box. Such tiny work may seem almost too small to matter, but it changes the feel of the place. A clear crack lets boards dry. A clean sill discourages dampness. A brushed chute feeds better. The Hayloft Dustmen's days are built from these almost invisible mercies, each one modest, each one useful, and together they keep the barn kind to those who work inside it. Outside, the sky lowers toward evening. In winter, this happens early, and the loft dims while chores still remain. In summer, it stretches, golden and long, making the dust shine as though the whole room were made of old pollen. In spring and autumn, the light seems to hesitate, neither leaving nor staying, while the farm gathers itself for night. You light a lantern if it is needed, or you pull the small chain of an electric bulb, if the barn has one and the current is steady. The bulb gives a plain yellow light, showing cobwebs, beam scars, and the floating dust nearest its glow. The lantern, by contrast, breathes a little, and its flame makes the shadows move gently over the hay. Either light changes the work. Under daylight, dust is everywhere and nowhere, visible in shafts and vanished in shadow. Under lamplight, it becomes local, gathered near the flame or bulb, drifting in a small bright world, while the far corners rest in darkness. You sweep more by memory then, following the path your boots already know. The Quebec winter makes this evening work especially close. The cold outside presses against the walls. Snow muffles the yard. The barn holds heat from the animals below, and the loft holds the dry, stored scent of hay overhead. You stand between those two comforts, and your breath moves softly through the cloth. Even dust seems slower in such weather. In warmer months, evening brings insects tapping faintly near the cracks, and the barn holds the smell of fields cooling after sun. You may hear frogs from a ditch, or a cart on the road, or the far murmur of neighbors finishing their own chores. The loft is not separate from these sounds. It receives them, softens them, and gives them back as part of its quiet. You take down a small rag and wipe the top of the grain bin stored at one side of the loft, if your barn keeps such things there. Dust has settled on the lid in an even skin. The rag leaves a darker path behind. You fold it once, then wipe again, slower, until the handprint from some earlier day disappears. The lid feels cool and slightly rough. There may be a scale nearby, or an old measure, or a wooden scoop used for feed. Each has its own dust line, its own place where fingers have worn the surface. You clean them not with polish, but with use-minded care. The scoop should be ready to enter grain. The scale should be readable. The bin should open without sending dust into your face. The dustman's role touches all these things. Hay may be the main matter, but dust travels across boundaries. It lies on grain lids, ladder rails, window ledges, rope coils, and the shoulders of old coats hung from pegs. You follow it as far as the day's time allows, knowing you will never finish forever, and not needing to. There is relief in a task that returns. It means tomorrow already has a place for you. The loft will not demand invention before dawn. It will ask for seeing, brushing, lifting, sorting, and listening, and these are things your hands understand. In a world that sometimes moves beyond the farm with news, engines, prices, and weather reports, the broom remains simple. Now you go to the west side, where the roof descends lower, and the air feels stiller. You duck beneath a beam and let your shoulder brush hay. The hay gives a dry whisper against your coat. A few stems cling to the wool. You smell dust, sun-dried grass, and the faint mineral cold of nails in wood. Your knees bend because the roof asks it of you. The west side is where odd lengths of lumber may be stored, and perhaps a spare gate, a broken handle, or a wheel rim kept because it might one day be useful. Farms keep possibilities in corners. You move each piece enough to sweep beneath it, then put it back where it can be found. The dust is thick here, but quiet, undisturbed for many days. You don't make a great cloud. You work in sections. Brush, pause, gather. Brush, pause, gather. The rhythm is slow enough that breathing stays easy. Through the wall, evening light enters in thin stripes and rests across your sleeve. The boards smell older here, less touched by daily passage, and the dust has the dry enclosed scent of forgotten shelves. A short length of rope has stiffened in a coil. You lift it, feel the roughness against your glove, and shake it once near the open air. Dust falls from it in a soft veil. Rope matters in a barn. It lifts, ties, steadies, and mends. Even when retired, it is rarely thrown away quickly. You hang it on a peg where it can breathe. This is one way the hayloft dustman's work becomes a form of remembering. Each object you touch has had a use, and many may have one again. You do not sort with the haste of someone clearing clutter for beauty. You sort with the caution of someone who knows that a cracked board, an old strap, or a short rope may save a trip in bad weather. The loft is not a museum. It is a working room, yet it carries history in a plain, unvarnished way. The beams may be older than you. The dust may contain traces of hay from more than one summer. The fork handle may remember hands no longer here. You do not need to make poetry of it while working. The poetry is already in the wear. As dusk thickens, someone below begins bedding the stalls. You hear straw shaken out, fork tines brushing the floor, and the low movement of animals making room. The sound is fuller than hay feeding, more rustle and scrape. It reminds you that the loft sweepings, sorted earlier, have entered the wider cycle of the barn. What could be used has found its place. You stand still near the chute and listen. The smell rising from below is warmer now, mixed with fresh bedding and animal breath. Your hands rest on the broom handle. It is a small pause, but not an empty one. The work has brought you to the kind of stillness that comes after doing enough, while knowing a little more remains. The final carry of the day is usually lighter: a box of dust, a sack not quite full, a few gathered scraps that belong outside. You lift them without strain and take them toward the door or ladder. The loft floor creaks under your careful steps, and the sound travels ahead of you like a quiet announcement. At the gable door, the evening air touches your face again. In a Quebec January, it may sting gently, clean and sharp, with the smell of snow and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. In a July dusk, it may be heavy with cut grass, warm earth, and the faint sweetness of clover still standing in field edges. You breathe once, slowly, before turning back inside. This breath is part of the work too. Dustmen learn to value clear air, not dramatically, simply. A breath at the open door, a pause by a crack of light, a cloth shaken outdoors, a broom set aside so dust can settle before the next pass. Care for the loft includes care for your own chest and throat, though no one may speak of it in those terms. You empty the day's last sweepings in the proper place. The dust falls and darkens as it meets the ground, losing its golden loft color. Then you close the door with both hands. The hinges complain softly. The latch settles. Inside, the hayloft becomes enclosed again, holding the day's remaining warmth like a folded blanket. You turn back and see the loft as it will be for night. The path is visible. The chute is clear. The tools stand where they should. The sacks are tied or folded. The corners are not spotless, because no living barn is spotless, but they are tended. The air still holds dust, but less of it, and what remains moves slowly, sinking toward rest. There is a certain kindness in leaving a place ready. You may be the one who returns before sunrise, but even so, the courtesy matters. The person who climbs into darkness tomorrow will find the broom. The person who reaches for hay will have room to stand. The person who breathes the loft air will find it a little clearer for what you did today. The dustman of a 1940s Quebec hayloft is not hurried toward an ending. The day thins gradually. There are still little checks to make, each one familiar enough to soothe rather than trouble the mind. You run a hand along the rail. You glance at the hay face. You confirm the knife is on its nail, and the fork is not lying where feet may find it. The broom itself needs care before it rests. You take it outside the loft door if weather allows, or to a clearer place near the opening, and tap the bristles lightly against a board. Dust loosens in puffs. Straw fragments fall. You do not strike hard, because a broom is only useful while its bristles keep their shape. You tap, shake, and smooth them with your glove. Then you hang it or stand it carefully, bristles free from damp boards. A broom left badly grows crooked. A broom kept well works longer. That is the sort of knowledge every quiet job carries, the plain maintenance that sits beneath the visible task. We notice it here because your whole day has been shaped by such modest wisdom. Now the cloth at your mouth can come away. It leaves a faint mark across your cheeks, and the air feels cooler without it. You fold it slowly, dust inward, and tuck it into a pocket or set it aside for washing. Your face feels exposed after hours of filtered breathing. You draw in the loft's scent more fully: hay, wood, animal warmth, and old sunlight stored in stems. Your cap comes off for a moment, and you brush your sleeve across your forehead. Dust clings there too, light as flour. The gesture is ordinary. It belongs to workers in barns, mills, shops, sheds, and yards across many years. A person wipes the day from the skin, but never completely. Some of the work comes along into supper and sleep. The Quebec evening settles around the barn. Outside, the house windows may begin to glow. Smoke may lift from a chimney and flatten in cold air. Somewhere a door closes, and the sound crosses the yard with a lonely softness. Inside the loft, you stand under rafters that have darkened with age, and the room feels neither empty nor full, but held. You check the ladder opening once more before going down. The top rung is clear. The rail is steady. No sack leans where it could slide. These checks take only moments, yet they belong to the rhythm as surely as sweeping. Work is not only action, it is the calm assurance that action has left nothing troublesome behind. Then you descend. One boot finds the rung, then the next. Your hand follows the rail. The smells change again in layers, as they did at noon, but now the lower barn is quieter. The animals are fed. The bedding is spread. The warmth below has deepened. You carry the loft with you in your clothes, in your hair, in the light dryness at the back of your throat. On the barn floor, lamplight or a bare bulb shines on straw and worn boards. The cows stand or lie in their stalls, chewing with slow, steady jaws. Their breath makes the air soft. You may pause by one stall to straighten a bit of hay or move a pail. Even when the loft work is done, your hands remain ready for small corrections. That readiness is part of farm life. The dustman's day does not end at the exact moment the broom is put away. It fades through the last chores. A latch checked, a door pulled snug, a lantern trimmed, a bit of straw kicked aside from a walking place. You move through these tasks with the same unhurried care, because the day has trained your body into quiet. If snow lies outside, it reflects the last light when you open the barn door. The cold reaches in low along the floor. You step out for a moment, perhaps to carry something to a shed or shake the last dust from your sleeves. The yard is packed hard by feet, runners, and hooves. The air smells of snow, smoke, and distant trees. If it is a softer season, the yard may be muddy, with straw scattered near the doorway and puddles holding the dim sky. Your boots make a low sucking sound at each step. The barn behind you glows faintly through its cracks. A bird may settle under the eaves. The whole farm seems to be lowering its voice, and you lower yours with it. We stay beside you as the day moves towards supper, because the hayloft dustman carries more than dust from the loft. You carry the measure of the stored hay, the memory of which corner needs checking after rain, and the knowledge of how much clearer the path is now. These are not grand thoughts. They are useful thoughts, and useful thoughts can be restful. Inside the house, if you enter it, heat gathers differently from the barn. It is stove heat, kitchen heat, the smell of boiled potatoes, tea, bread, wool drying, and perhaps onions or pork. You may hang your coat away from the cleanest room because hay dust follows cloth. When you remove your boots, bits of chaff fall near the threshold. Someone may brush your shoulder and smile at the dust there. Someone may say little. The farm does not need many words for work everyone understands. You wash your hands in a basin, and the water clouds slightly as dust leaves the creases of your skin. The towel feels rough and clean. Your hands smell faintly of soap, but underneath remains the dry trace of hay. At supper, your arms know they have worked, but not in a harsh way. The tiredness is broad and low, spread through shoulders, wrists, and back. It is the tiredness of repeated motions completed without hurry. You lift a spoon. You hold a cup. Outside, the barn stands dark against the evening, and above the animals, the loft rests in its cleared order. Conversation drifts. Weather again, because weather is never small on a farm. Feed again, because feed carries winter on its back. A neighbor, a road, a letter, a price, a tool needing repair. The world of the 1940s reaches even here, through rationing memories, post-war changes, new machines, and old habits staying on. But the dustman's body listens most closely to the stove and the quiet after work. Later, you may step back to the barn for one last look. Many farms ask for this, a final round before sleep, not because trouble is expected, but because rest comes easier when doors and animals are known. The yard is darker now. The stars, if the sky is clear, seem sharpened by cold or softened by summer haze. Your boots know the path without needing much light. The barn door opens with the same sound it made before, only quieter in the dark. Inside, animals stir but do not rise fully. You hear chewing, breathing, the shift of weight. The air is warm compared with outside. You stand a moment and let your eyes adjust. The loft above is only a dark shape, but you know its paths and tools as clearly as if daylight still rested there. You may climb partway up, just to check the latch near the loft or the lantern place, and the first steps bring the hay scent toward you again. In darkness, smell becomes stronger. The dry sweetness of the loft descends like a memory. You do not need to sweep now. The broom is resting. The dust is settling. The work has entered its night form. The night form of work is not idleness. It is readiness. The hay waits where you left it. The chute waits clear. The fork waits against the beam. The floorboards hold the prints and faint marks of the day. But nothing asks to be corrected. This is how a workplace sleeps. Not by becoming empty, but by having all its useful things in place. You descend again and close the lower door. The latch feels cold if the season is cold, or faintly damp if the air is soft. You press it until it catches. The sound is small, but it closes the day around the barn. Then you turn toward the house, carrying the last breath of hayloft air with you across the yard. While you sleep, dust will continue its slow life. Fine particles will settle on beams. Chaff will rest where the evening air left it. A stem may slide from the stack with a dry tick. The barn will creak in the night as temperature changes the boards. Nothing is hurried. Even the dust keeps farm time, patient and almost invisible. By morning, there will be something to do again. Not too much, perhaps. Not a great disorder. Just the ordinary return of use. A little line near the chute. A soft veil on the rail. Loose hay where feeding began in the dark. The QUEBEC Hayloft Dustmen's Day will open from these small signs, and your hands will answer them before your mind fully wakes. That next morning begins in the body, before it begins in thought. You rise into cool air. You dress by habit. The cloth for your mouth is found, folded and tied. The barn waits with its familiar shape in the dimness. When you open the door, the smell comes first. Warm animals below and dry hay above. The two halves of the building breathing together. The ladder or stairs take you upward again. Each step has the mild ache of yesterday in it, but also the ease of practice. You enter the loft, and the darkness is no longer strange. We are here again with you, quiet as before, while the first grey light searches the roof boards and the stored hay waits along the wall. You touch the broom where it rests. Its handle is cool. Its bristles are properly dry. That small success belongs to yesterday's careful ending. You lift it and feel how one day prepares the next. This is one of the hidden comforts of repetitive work, that attention does not vanish when the shift is done. It remains in the placement of things. The first morning sweep is light, because the evening work was faithful. You draw the broom along the path, collecting only what settled overnight. The dust moves easily. A few chaff flakes turn and slide. Your boots make low sounds on the boards. Below, someone begins the first store work, and the barn slowly rises into its shared routine. In the cold months, the loft can hold frost along nail heads and cracks, tiny pale beads where air has met wood. You see them near the gable before the sun touches them. You do not brush them hard. You let the morning decide. A barn teaches this too, that not everything must be handled at once. Some things are watched until their proper moment arrives. In damp weather, you open what can be opened briefly, letting air pass through without chilling the whole place too much. The door moves outward, and grey light fills the loft. The air stirs the hay ends and lifts yesterday's faint dust from a beam. You stand aside and let it move. Then you close the door again before the weather brings too much of itself indoors. Every season changes the dust. Winter dust is dry, pale, and fine, with the clean bite of cold around it. Spring dust is heavier, mixed with damp wood smells and the first mud carried on boots. Summer dust is warm and grassy, rising quickly in the heat. Autumn dust holds the richness of new hay and drying leaves, and it seems to glow whenever the sun comes through the boards. You learn these differences without needing to speak them. They shape how you sweep, how long you pause, how much you open the door, and where you place the gathered piles. The Hayloft Dustmen in 1940s Quebec may not use fine words for air and moisture, but the knowledge is exact in the hands. It is practical, sensory, and patient. On this morning, the loft is dry enough for a deeper clearing near the south wall. You have been meaning to get there for several days. Work often happens this way, not all at once, but as time and weather allow. You choose the moment when chores below are settled. Light is sufficient, and the dust will not hang too heavily in the air. The south wall smells sunnier, even before it warms. Boards that catch more light seem to hold a different scent, resinous and faintly sweet. You move a small stack of empty sacks, shake each one gently, and lay them across a beam to air. Their burlap surfaces release grain dust, hay dust, and the faint smell of mice passing somewhere in the night, though none are seen now. You sweep beneath the sack's old place. The dust there is mixed with bits of string, seed husks, and a few dry leaves blown in during haying. A maple leaf, curled nearly to nothing, breaks softly under the broom. You pause at that sound. It is so small, yet in the still loft it seems complete, the whole autumn of some past day reduced to one quiet crackle. We let the broom continue. The pile grows slowly. Your arms settle into the movement. The south wall becomes cleaner by inches, not by command. Light shows the change first, resting more evenly on the boards. Then your feet feel it, because the floor beneath them no longer has that faint sliding grit. The room becomes easier to inhabit. This is why dust work matters beyond appearance. A clear floor changes balance. A clear rail changes grip. A clear chute changes feeding. A clear shelf changes what can be found when weather is poor and light is short. The quiet jobs of history often live in these practical comforts, which rarely enter records but shape every hour of ordinary life. In the 1940s, Quebec is full of such work, repeated in barns, dairies, mills, bakehouses, sheds, and small workshops. People brush flour from benches, shavings from floors, coal dust from thresholds, wool lint from machines, and hay dust from lofts. Each place has its own smell and rhythm. Yours is hay, wood, animal warmth, and the careful hush of the broom. When the south wall is finished, you straighten slowly. The back complains in a mild, familiar way. You set one hand against a beam and let your shoulders settle. Outside, morning has become day. A wagon or truck moves somewhere beyond the barn, and its sound comes in pieces through the boards. You do not need to look. The loft holds you where you are. You take a drink from a tin cup kept near the stairs, if there is water set aside, or you wait until you go below. The metal is cold against your lip. Water tastes different after dust work, cleaner and more generous. You swallow slowly, feeling the throat clear. Then the cup returns to its place, upside down if possible, so dust does not claim the inside too quickly. A small act like turning a cup upside down belongs to the same family as hanging the broom properly. It is foresight made simple. The dustman does not need elaborate plans to use his days well. He needs the habit of leaving things ready, covered, aired, tied, wiped, or placed beyond the reach of damp and careless feet. The loft's middle path is now clear enough for feeding, so you turn to the stored hay itself. The stack has settled during the night, and its face leans a little near the chute. You place both hands against it, not pushing hard, simply feeling the firmness. Hay packed well has a springy resistance. Hay that has loosened too much shifts under the palm. You use the fork to draw down the loose outer layer. It falls in a fragrant sheet, stems sliding over stems. Dust comes with it, but not too much, because yesterday's cutting left a tidy face. You shake the hay gently and set it aside for the next feeding. The movement is slow, broad and familiar, like opening a curtain made of dried summer. The scent is strongest at the newly opened surface. Clover, timothy, orchard grass, perhaps alfalfa if the field gave it, all dried into one warm blend. You may not name each plant, but your nose knows a good cutting. Sweet hay smells alive even after months in the loft. Poor hay smells flat, damp or sour. This morning's hay is good enough, and that brings ease. You brush the dust that fell from the opened face. It gathers in a small golden fan at your feet. The broom moves through it lightly, and the fan becomes a line, then a pile, then part of the box. There is a pleasure in turning scattered things into gathered things. The mind rests in that motion, because the result is visible and honest. Below, the morning feeding calls again. You pitch hay down the chute, and the barn answers with sound. Animals shift, mangers fill. A voice below says that's enough, or asks for a little more. You adjust. The dustman's work is never isolated from the needs beneath him. The loft floor is a ceiling too, and every task up here has a shadow in the stable below. After feeding, the air is thick enough that you pause near the gable and let the dust settle. You stand with one shoulder close to the door, watching the bright particles turn and sink. Your breathing slows. The cloth over your mouth warms with each exhale. It is not a dramatic pause, it is simply how the work is done well. In these moments, the mind wanders softly. You might think of the fields when this hay stood upright, the mower passing, the rake turning rows, the wagon loaded high enough to sway. You might remember sun on the back of your neck, flies at the horse's flank, the dusty sweetness of haying clothes. Now all of that summer stands packed under winter rafters. The hayloft is a timekeeper, not with hands or numbers, but with layers. The top of the stack tells of the most recent cutting. The lower portions hold older days. The sweepings at your feet come from all of it mingled together, broken fragments of a season passing through your hands. We can stay quiet with that, because the thought is gentle enough for sleep. When dust has settled, you begin the shelf near the east post. It holds a lantern, a tin of matches, a coil of twine, a spare hinge, and a few objects no one has moved in months. You take each down in turn. The shelf shows clean circles beneath them, little moons of absence where dust could not fall. You wipe around them, then return them carefully. The lantern glass needs special care. You lift it toward the light and see a film across it. Smoke inside, dust outside. With a clean corner of cloth, you polish it in slow circles. The glass becomes clearer, though never new. A working lantern carries scratches and small marks. Its purpose is not beauty, but a steady flame when the barn asks for one. The matches stay in their tin, closed tight. The twine hangs where fingers can find it. The hinge remains because hinges are always needed eventually. You smile perhaps, only faintly, at the logic of keeping such things. A farm wastes little. A dustman learns to clean around usefulness without mistaking it for clutter. The east post itself has names carved or penciled into it. Maybe initials, maybe dates, maybe only marks used for counting loads. You brush the dust lightly there, not scrubbing. The marks belong to the barn's story. Some may come from children waiting during chores. Some may come from haying crews. Some may have been made before you were born, by hands that also carried dust on their sleeves. In a 1940s QUEBEC Hayloft, the past is not framed on a wall. It is under your palm. It is in worn rungs, patched sacks, old tool handles, and the shine on a latch. You don't need to speak about it much. You simply work among it, adding your own thin layer, then clearing another away. Late morning brings a fuller light, and with it the chance to inspect the rafters near the main stack. You do not climb high or make a dangerous show of it. You use what can be reached from the boards, with a long-handled brush or broom turned carefully upward. The bristles pass along the lower beam, and loose dust drops in a soft grey shower. You step back before it falls. Waiting is part of the motion. The dust lands where you can gather it. Some clings to your sleeve, some rests on the hay, and you brush it off gently. The beam above looks a little more defined, its edges clearer in the light. That is all you ask from the morning, one beam more awake than before. The sounds below have changed again, and you can tell without looking that the busiest milking work is done. Metal has gone quieter. Water moves somewhere, perhaps in a pail or basin. A door opens and closes with a sharper note. The farm shifts from one set of chores to another, and the dustman's tasks shift with it, always fitting into the spaces the day provides. You carry the morning's box down before it grows too full. The weight is modest, but the stairs ask for attention. Each step is taken flat and sure. The box brushes your leg. Dust tries to rise from it, but you keep it level. At the bottom, you set it in its proper place and straighten, feeling the lower barn's warmth close around you. Someone may hand you a message without ceremony. The harness needs checking. The road is slick. A neighbor may come by. There is talk of weather turning. You listen, nod, and carry the knowledge back upstairs. The dustman's day is quiet, but it is never cut off from the farm's larger needs. It bends as the day bends. Back in the loft, you choose a shorter task, one that can be left easily if called away. You fold sacks. Each one is shaken, inspected, and laid flat. The cloth is rough and dry. Some sacks bear printed letters faded by use, flour mills, feed companies, places along the St. Lawrence or beyond. The words are not the point, but they give the hands something to notice. You stack them with edges aligned, because aligned sacks are easier to count and carry. A crooked pile slides. A neat pile waits. This small order saves effort later, and saving effort later is one of the quiet currencies of farm life. You place the stack on a board raised slightly from the floor, away from damp and the drift of daily sweepings. Then you brush the place where the sacks had lain. The dust there has the smell of burlap and grain rather than hay. It is a different scent, warmer and drier, almost nutty. You gather it separately because habits of separation keep the mind clear. Hay chaff here, grain dust there, spoiled sweepings elsewhere. The loft becomes understandable through these distinctions. The body enjoys understandable work. It knows where to begin, where to place the hand, when to stop. You may not call it enjoyment exactly, but there is relief in it. The world beyond the farm may be full of decisions that arrive by letter, price, weather, or news. Here the next motion is usually visible at your feet. Near noon again, the loft settles into a brighter stillness. You sit for a moment on an overturned box, not on the hay this time, and let your boots rest flat on the swept boards. The cloth at your mouth hangs loose. Your hands lie open on your knees. Dust marks the lines of your gloves, and a single hayseed clings to one cuff. We sit quietly with you, and nothing needs to be improved in this minute. The barn breathes below. The hay waits beside you. The tools stand where they belong. Work will resume, because work always does. But for now the pause is held inside the day, like a warm stone in a pocket. The noon light shows the loft without romance, and without harshness. It shows patched boards, rough knots, uneven stacks, dust that remains in high places, and the plain usefulness of everything around you. This is not a polished place. It is a working place. Its beauty comes from the fact that it is being used carefully by many hands across many ordinary mornings. When you rise, your knees answer slowly. You take the box, the brush, and the broom back into motion. The next area is the narrow space behind the stored ladder, where hay dust has gathered in a sloping ridge. You move the ladder only as far as needed. It is wooden, long, and awkward, with side rails worn smooth in patches and rough in others. The ridge behind it breaks apart under the broom. It contains dry grass, grey dust, and tiny flakes of old mud from boots that once leaned there. You sweep it out slowly, keeping the pile low. The ladder casts a striped shadow over your hands. Outside, the light shifts as a cloud crosses the sun, and the loft dims for a few breaths. Cloud shadows are part of the day's rhythm too. When light fades, dust becomes harder to see, so you work by feel and memory for a moment. Then the sun returns, and the floating specks appear again, patient and numberless. You might think they look like time itself, but the thought passes quietly, because the broom is already moving. After the ladder space is clean, you return the ladder to its wall, setting its feet firmly. You test it with one hand, not climbing, just making sure it rests as it should. Then you sweep the fresh marks left by moving it. Nothing in a loft is moved without leaving some sign. The dustman's eye notices, answers, and moves on. The afternoon ahead will bring more of the same, and that sameness is not emptiness. It is the core of the work. Sweep, sort, feed, check, carry, wipe, pause. The words could sound plain enough to vanish, yet inside each one is 100 small differences of weather, season, light, tool, and touch. You live inside those differences, calmly and without needing to name them all. As the meal hour approaches, you take one last look toward the chute. The path is clear. The hay is ready. The broom rests within reach, because after feeding, chaff will fall again. Nothing here stays finished in a permanent way, and that is part of its mercy. The work returns, but gently, in forms you know. Downstairs, the noon sounds begin. A door to the house opens. A voice carries across the yard. The lower barn quiets as people leave their tasks for food. You stand in the loft for one more breath, surrounded by stored hay and the soft evidence of your morning, then turn toward the ladder with the unhurried care of someone whose day has found its rhythm. You descend with the same measured care, one hand on the rail and the other brushing lightly against the wall, where many hands have passed before yours. The lower barn receives you with warmer air, fuller smell, and the soft shifting of animals who know the noon hour as surely as you do. Straw clings to the damp places near the doorway. A pail stands upside down to dry. Your boots make a quieter sound here, less hollow than in the loft. At the threshold between barn and yard, the day opens wider. The light can feel almost bright after the sheltered loft, even when clouds lie low over the fields. You pause and let your eyes adjust. The smell changes again, from hay and animals to weather, smoke, soil, and whatever season waits outside. In 1940s Quebec, the farmyard is its own working room, with paths worn between barn, house, shed, well, and road. Your coat carries the loft with it. Fine hay dust rests along the sleeve seams, in the turn of the collar, and around the cuffs where your gloves ended. When you move, a little of it lifts in the outdoor air and is gone. Not all of it. Some stays with you through dinner, because the work has a way of traveling in small, quiet traces. The house is warmer than the barn, but its warmth has a different patience. It holds stove heat, damp wool, cut bread, boiled vegetables, and the clean smell of scrubbed wood near the basin. You wash slowly, because hay dust hides in the lines of your palms and under the edges of your nails. The water clouds, then clears. You dry your hands on a rough towel and feel the skin wake under the cloth. At the table, the food is simple and enough. Bread, soup, potatoes, tea, perhaps a bit of meat, perhaps preserves if there is sweetness to spare. You sit with the kind of hunger made by steady work rather than haste. Talk moves around you gently. Weather, feed, a neighbor's road, a machine that may need a new belt before long. The hayloft is not named often, but it is present in the dust on your shoulder. We stay close to that quiet meal because it belongs to the dustman's day as much as the broom. A working day is not only the visible labor, it is also the warming of hands around a cup, the lowering of the eyes while soup steams upward, and the way tired shoulders loosen when the body understands it has been fed. Outside, the barn waits, not impatiently, but with the calm certainty of a place that knows you will return. After the meal, you do not spring up. No one does, not unless weather or animals demand it. You sit a little longer, hearing the stove breathe and the faint tick of cooling metal. A clock marks time in the room, but the farm's real clock is broader, made of light, feeding, milking, thaw, frost, and the daily need to put each thing back where it can be found. When you stand again, the body feels heavier for a few minutes. Warm food does that. It settles the limbs. You put on the coat with hay dust still in its seams, and the familiar smell comes back around you. The cloth for your mouth is folded in a pocket, ready. Your gloves wait where you left them, palms pale with dust, fingers shaped by work. The walk back to the barn is short, but it returns you from household rhythm to barn rhythm. In winter, boots crunch over packed snow, and the cold clears your face after the kitchen's warmth. In spring, mud pulls gently at the soles, and the air smells of thawed earth and wet straw. In summer, flies circle the doorway, and sunlight rests on the boards. In autumn, the yard holds a dry leaf smell under the sharpness of coming frost. The barn door opens, and the afternoon begins in a lower key. Animals lift their heads, then settle again. A chain rings softly against wood. Somewhere a hen may scratch near the threshold, if hens have found their way close, and you guide it aside with a quiet foot rather than a word. You cross the lower floor and climb toward the loft, carrying the warm stillness of dinner back into dust and hay. The first breath upstairs is always telling. Afternoon hay smells richer than morning hay, because the loft has held the day's warmth. The air is thicker, not unpleasant, only fuller. Dust lies visible in brighter strips where light enters through the wall. The path you swept before noon remains clear, and that gives a small satisfaction before your hand even reaches the broom. You begin again near the chute, because feeding after dinner will soon disturb the hay. The board lip holds a new little scatter where morning work and noon handling left loose bits behind. You brush it clean with the small brush, using short strokes that keep dust low. The wood beneath appears in dull brown lines. Your fingers feel the edge, checking for splinters without needing to look closely. The Hayloft Dustman in Quebec works partly for the people below and partly for the future version of himself who will arrive tired or half awake. A smooth chute edge saves a torn sleeve. A clear patch of floor saves a stumble. A fork set upright saves a search in dim light. These comforts are quiet, but they are real, and they accumulate through days. You loosen another section of hay, not yet sending it below, only preparing it. The fork enters the stack with that soft parted sound, and the hay gives way in a sheet. Dust falls first, then broken leaves, then the longer stems settle against the tines. You shake once, not sharply, and the air fills with a golden haze that rises, pauses, and sinks. You wait for it. Waiting is woven through the work. You wait for dust to settle, for light to move, for animals to finish, for weather to pass, for wet boards to dry. Waiting does not mean idleness here. It means choosing the right pace, and the right pace is one that lets the barn remain calm around you. The prepared hay is set aside in a neat, loose mound. Its smell is sweet enough to feel almost warm. You clear the dust beneath it, then step back. The mound waits for the next call from below, and the waiting hay seems to belong to both past and future at once. Cut months ago, stored overhead, soon to be eaten slowly in the warm stalls. Afternoon is a good time for mending small things, not large repairs, not work that belongs to a carpenter or a full clear day, but little corrections that a dustman sees because he spends hours among neglected edges. A loose nail in a wall board, a fraying twine loop, a sack seam beginning to open. You notice them as naturally as you notice dust. Near the east wall, one peg has begun to work itself outward. It holds little weight now, but someday it may be asked to hold more. You press it with your thumb and feel the give. From a shelf, you take a small hammer, its handle short and dark with use. The metal head is cool. You tap once, twice, gently, and the peg settles back into the wood. The sound is modest, not a ringing blow, only a small wooden correction. Dust jumps from the board with each tap and settles on your sleeve. You brush it away with the back of your glove. Then the hammer returns to its place, head inward, handle easy to grasp. The peg is ready again. Nothing has changed dramatically, and that is exactly the point. You turn to a sack with a torn corner. It has held feed, then chaff, then perhaps rags, and the fabric is thinning where it has been dragged across boards. You sit on the low box and take twine through the edge with a blunt needle if one is near, or simply tie a rough binding around the damaged place. The burlap scratches at your fingers. A little dust rises from the fold. This is not fine sewing. It is farm mending, meant to give an object another season of use. The stitches are wide. The knot is plain. You tug the corner and it holds well enough. The sack will not carry grain again, perhaps, but it can carry sweepings, dry chaff, or the odds and ends that gather in a barn. Usefulness shifts shape. The dustman's days are full of such shifts. A clean sack becomes a feed sack. A worn feed sack becomes a dust sack. A broken crate becomes a sorting box. A short board becomes a spacer to keep things off damp floors. Nothing is sentimental in the moment, yet the whole loft becomes a place where usefulness is extended quietly, as if every object deserves a chance to finish its service. Outside, afternoon clouds thicken. The light grows flatter, and the air entering through cracks feels cooler. You sense the change before you look. A barn teaches weather, through small signals, the smell of damp, the direction of a draft, the way animals below grow restless or settle heavily. You go to the gable door and open it a little, just enough to read the yard. The sky has lowered, perhaps with snow, perhaps with rain. Across the yard the house seems nearer, under grey light. The fields beyond are muted, with fence lines drawn softly through the distance. You breathe through the cloth and smell weather coming. It has a clean edge if snow is near, a darker earth smell if rain is on the way. You close the door before the loft cools too much. Weather changes the afternoon plan. If damp is coming, you check the vulnerable places first. The north wall, the door sill, the crack near the old pulley. You run a hand along boards, feeling for wetness. Most places are dry. One corner holds a faint chill, but no moisture yet. You brush away dust there so the wood can breathe more easily. The old pulley hangs quiet above the main door, iron darkened by age and use. During haying, it may have helped lift loads or move tackle, depending on the barn's arrangement. Now it watches the off-season in silence. Dust gathers along its wheel and hook, but you do not disturb it beyond what you can reach safely. A loft has high places that belong to another day's work. Below the pulley, the floor shows old scuffs from hay, entering in great loads. You sweep those scuffs, though the marks remain. They are not dirt. They are history pressed into wood. You can almost hear the summer wagon backing in. Voices calling softly, forkfuls rising and falling, hay sliding across boards, boots trampling the stack down. Now the same place receives only your broom. There is a companionship between the loud season and the quiet season. Summer fills the loft. Winter empties it slowly. Autumn settles it. Spring cleans after it. The dustman moves through all four. doing the quieter parts that make the larger cycle possible. In 1940s Quebec, this rhythm is old enough to feel like landscape, yet daily enough to live in your hands. A call comes from below. The animals are ready for more hay. You lift the prepared mound and guide it into the chute. The hay falls in a soft rush, and a sweetness rises back toward you as if the chute were breathing out. You send another forkful, then wait. The voice below says enough. You set the fork aside and brush the lip clean again. Every feeding makes a little disorder. That is not failure. It is the sign of use. The dustman accepts this without irritation, because irritation would only waste breath. You sweep the fallen chaff into a line, gather it, and return the longer stems where they can still serve. The smallest dust goes to the box. The afternoon resumes. The weather arrives softly. If snow, it begins as a faint tapping against the roof or a muffled hush around the walls. If rain, it darkens the boards near the gaps and brings a mineral smell into the loft. You do not dramatize it. You simply adapt. The gable door remains closed. The brushing near draft lines slows. The path work continues where the air is steady. Under grey weather, the loft feels more enclosed. The hay seems to hold its color inwardly, no longer shining but glowing dull gold in the dimness. Your footsteps sound nearer. The animals below seem closer too, their breathing rising through the boards. The whole barn becomes one warm object under the weather, with you moving quietly in its upper room. This is a good hour for checking stored small tools. You kneel by a shallow wooden tray that holds nails, bits of leather, a worn buckle, and 2 wooden wedges. Dust lies over everything in an even layer. You carry the tray to a clearer patch and wipe each item enough to see it. Nails are sorted by length. Leather is checked for brittleness. The buckle is returned because it may still be needed. Your fingers move slowly, and the small objects make tiny sounds in the tray. A nail rolls against wood. A wedge taps another wedge. The buckle gives a dull little clink. These sounds are quiet enough to belong to sleep, repetitive enough to become almost a lullaby. We remain with them because they are part of the hidden music of a working loft. One wedge has a split. You set it aside, not discarded, but no longer trusted for heavier use. Another wedge is sound. It goes back near the door, where someone may need to hold it open during haying or airing. This is how decisions are made here, not with long thought, but with hands, eyes, and experience meeting one small thing at a time. The tray's place on the shelf is brushed clean before it returns. You make a darker rectangle in the dust, then widen it until the board looks usable again. The tray goes back. Its contents are clearer. A person reaching for a nail in poor light will not need to sift blindly through dust. This, too, is care. By now, the afternoon has deepened. If snow is falling, the light through cracks becomes paler, more diffused. If rain is falling, the roof speaks in a steady, soft patter. The Hayloft dustman's work changes little either way, but the feeling around it changes greatly. Weather makes the barn feel held apart from the world, and your slow sweeping becomes part of that shelter. You move toward the haymow's outer edge, where loose stems have slid down and formed a ragged skirt. With the fork, you lift and fold them back against the stack. The stems resist slightly, catching on one another. Your arms move in broad arcs, and the hay settles into a cleaner line. Dust puffs at the base, then rests. The base of a haystack must be watched. Too much loose hay there narrows the path. Too much dust there hides dropped twine or small hard objects. You sweep carefully along the edge, keeping the broom angled so it does not pull good hay apart. This is a delicate motion, learned by doing it badly once or twice, then remembering. You find a small wooden tag half covered in dust. Perhaps it once marked a load, a bin or a piece of equipment. Its writing has faded. You rub it with your thumb, but only a few letters show. The tag goes on the shelf with other things that might find a use later. The dust where it lay is swept into the pile, and the path grows clearer. A person might imagine the dustman's day as endless cleaning, but inside it there is variety as subtle as weather on fields. Heavy sweeping, light brushing, sorting, feeding, watching air, mending, carrying, resting, checking. Each task uses the body differently, and the changes keep the rhythm from becoming harsh. You are tired, but not driven. The cloth at your mouth is damp now from breath. You replace it with another if one is available, or loosen it during a pause near clearer air. The skin beneath feels warm. You look toward the door and consider opening it, but the weather says no for now. So you stand near the ladder opening instead, where air from below rises warmer and steadier. Below, a person hums without thinking. The tune has no sharpness, no performance. It drifts up through the boards in broken pieces, mixed with the sound of a stall fork and the quiet shifting of animals. You recognize it, or perhaps only recognize its comfort. Work songs do not always need words. Sometimes a few notes are enough to keep the day moving. You answer it only by continuing your own rhythm. Broom against floor. Pause. Broom against floor. Lift the box. Set it down. Brush the rail. Shake the sack. The hayloft gathers these sounds and holds them under the roof, and the weather outside makes them feel even softer. In a 1940s Quebec barn, tools often outlast their first owners. The broom may be newer, replaced when bristles wore too far, but the fork may have belonged to someone older. The hay knife might have cut through stacks before roads were plowed by machine. The ladder could have been built by a neighbor. The dustman works with objects that carry more years than he counts. You do not dwell on that heavily. You simply take care of them. A tool that has lasted deserves to be used correctly. A tool that is wearing deserves to be noticed before it fails. You run your eye along the fork tines and see that one is slightly bent, but not enough to matter today. You make a mental note for a quieter hour. The rain, if it is rain, steadies overhead. The roof does its work. A few darker lines appear near old nail holes, but no drops fall. You watch them anyway. The barn has kept out many storms, and part of your work is listening for the places where age asks for attention. Dust and water are opposites in feel, yet in a loft they are always in conversation. Where water might come, dust must not lie too thick. It holds dampness and hides the board beneath. You brush those places when weather gives warning, giving wood a cleaner chance to dry. This is not a rule from a book. It is a rule from years of noticing what happens when corners are ignored. The dustman's science is simple, close, and exact. Afternoon slips toward late day. You can feel it in the body, in the way the hands become steadier rather than quicker. The work now is not about beginning anything large. It is about completing enough small things to leave the loft sensible before evening chores take over. You tie one sack. You fold another. You clear the short path from ladder to chute once more. The short path is the heart of the loft. Most of the day's movement crosses it. Boots, hay, sacks, boxes, tools, hands in the dark. You sweep it more often than any other place, not because it stays clean, but because it matters most. A clear path is a quiet promise that the work can continue without stumbling. At the edge of the path, a board creaks differently today. You place your weight on it, then off, listening. It is not loose, only complaining in the damp air. Still, you look at the nail heads and the seam beside it. The dust there is brushed aside. The board shows no split. You leave it, but you remember. Tomorrow, in dry light, you may check again. This kind of remembering is gentle. It does not trouble the mind. It sits there like a tied string around the day's finger. The dustman carries several such small notes, not written down but held in the body. Check the north corner after rain. Replace the cloth. Watch the bent time. Move the crate before howling. None of it rushes. All of it waits its turn. A little later, the weather eases. The roof grows quieter. The light changes. Not brighter exactly, but less closed. You open the gable door a hand's width and let the loft breathe. Cool air enters and moves over your face. It smells washed. The dust nearest the door trembles, then settles again. You stand aside, letting old air leave and new air enter. Ventilation is one of the dustman's quiet arts. Too much air scatters the very dust you mean to gather. Too little air leaves the loft close and heavy. The right amount depends on season, weather, and the time since feeding. You learn it by feel, by the sting in the nose, by the way dust hangs or falls, by the sweetness or dullness of the hay smell. With the door cracked open, you sweep near the sill one more time. The outdoor light outlines your broom. Beyond the opening, the yard is wet or white, shining faintly under the afternoon sky. You hear a distant cart, or perhaps only water dropping from an eave. The world beyond the loft continues, but softly, as though it knows this hour is meant to be low and steady. The sill gives up a line of grit. Road dust, hay dust, barn dust, all mixed by drafts. You gather it into the box, then wipe the sill with the rag. The wood feels damp at the outer edge, but dry inside. That is good. You leave the door open a little longer, just enough for air, then latch it before the chill goes too deep. Evening chores approach. The dustman's work narrows again around feeding, bedding, and readiness. You prepare hay near the chute, check that the fork is clear, and move the box of sweepings away from the walking line. The loft feels organized now, not spotless, but awake to its purpose. Every object has room around it. A voice below calls for hay, and you answer by movement. The fork lifts, the hay shakes, dust falls, the chute receives the feed. Below, the animals begin their slow chewing, and the barn's whole mood changes toward night. Feeding is one of the day's anchors. No matter what weather comes, no matter what news arrives, animals must eat. You send the last forkful and brush the chute edge after it. This little brushing after feeding is almost automatic now. Your hand reaches for the brush before thought catches up. The bristles cross the lip, the loose bits fall, and the edge is clear again. Such habits make the work less tiring, because the mind does not need to command every small act. The late light, when it returns after rain or snow, can be very soft. It enters the cracks in faint silver or dull gold, depending on the sky. Dust floats in it with the slow drift of something underwater. You watch only for a moment, then sweep what has fallen near your boots. Beauty and work do not interrupt each other here. They share the same space. A final afternoon task waits near the small window, if the loft has one. The glass is dusty, and the sill holds dead flies, seed husks, and a little grey powder. You wipe the glass with cloth, not to make it shine like a house window, but to let more light enter tomorrow. The cloth leaves streaks, then clearer places. Outside, the world appears in muted patches. Through that glass, Quebec is fields, fence posts, road, trees, and sky. In winter, it is snowbanks and smoke. In summer, it is green fields and a shimmer of heat. In autumn, it is stubble, low sun, and leaves gathered along stone lines or ditches. You look only briefly, because the window is part of the work, but the view settles somewhere in you. The sill is brushed clean. The dead flies go with the sweepings. The seed husks are gathered. You run a finger along the inner edge and find it dry. Good. The small window will give better light in the morning, and that is enough reason for the task. You step back and see the loft slightly brighter where it matters. The dustman's days use light carefully. Before electricity, and even after it arrives, daylight remains a working tool. A clear window, an open door, a swept path beneath a beam of sun. These things help the body move safely, and the eye catch what needs attention. You don't think of light as equipment, but you use it that way. Evening settles more firmly now. The lower barn is active again, but its activity is familiar and soothing. The clank of a pail, the rustle of bedding, a low voice, the soft thud of a hoof. You move through the loft in sympathy with those sounds, finishing what can be finished and leaving the rest in good order. You return to the west side and collect the small pile left from earlier brushing. It is weighted without spreading because the air was calm there. You sweep it into the box and notice how the floor beneath seems lighter. Not clean in a new way, but cared for. That distinction matters. A working loft does not seek newness. It seeks the kind of care that lets use continue. The box is nearly full. You carry it carefully, 2 hands close to the body. The dust inside shifts with each step. Near the ladder you pause, because someone below is passing with a pail. You wait until the path is clear. The waiting lasts only a few breaths. Then you descend and set the box where evening disposal can be done without stirring the barn. Back upstairs, the loft feels larger without the full box. You notice that often after removing sweepings. Space returns. Air feels easier. The floor seems more honest underfoot. You stand near the center and let your eyes move slowly from wall to wall. This is not inspection in a severe sense. It is a quiet conversation with the room. The north corner will need attention tomorrow if damp remains. The bent fork tine can wait. The sacks are folded, the window is clearer. The chute is ready, the path is swept. The broom, for now, stays in your hand, because there is always one more light pass before tools rest. You make that pass slowly, along the path, around the chute, beside the ladder, under the shelf, near the door. Each area receives only what it needs. The broom's sound changes with each surface. Dry rasp on open boards, softer hush near hay, sharper scratch where grit lies by the sill. Your ears know these differences as well as your hands do. The final dust gathers in a thin line. You draw it toward the small pan or the corner of the box still available. A few stubborn pieces cling to cracks. You leave the deepest ones for daylight, because night work should not become fussy work. There is wisdom in knowing when enough has been done. The loft is ready for evening. The rest can wait. Now you set the broom aside and lift the cloth from your face. The air feels open. You shake the cloth gently away from the hay, fold it, and tuck it into the pocket where it belongs. Your throat is dry, but not sore. Your hands are tired but steady. A bit of hay rests on your shoulder, and you let it remain until you go below. The dustman of the QUEBEC Hayloft has used the afternoon without drama. He has made air clearer, paths safer, tools readier, feet cleaner, and tomorrow less clumsy. None of this will be announced. The reward is built into the place itself, in the way it receives your final glance and seems to say, without words, that it can rest. You take down the lantern, or reach for the light switch, depending on what this barn has been given. If using the lantern, you check the flame and the oil, because evening rounds may still require it. If using the bulb, you watch it glow over the brushed boards and shadowed hay. Either way, light now belongs to closing work. The lower barn calls again, not with words, but with sound. Bedding, milking, latching, water. You leave the loft and climb down, carrying a little of its dryness into the warmer air below. The animals are calm. Their bodies make soft shapes in the dimness. Their eyes catch light briefly, then turn away. You move among them with the quiet steps of someone who has been moving quietly all day. A stall needs a little more bedding near the back. Though this is not strictly loft dusting, it belongs to the same circle of care. You fork straw into place, spreading it with practiced motions. The straw smells fresher than the hay dust, brighter and sharper. It whispers against the floor. An animal shifts and settles, and the stall looks more comfortable for the night. Some of the usable chaff saved earlier may be mixed where appropriate, giving softness beneath coarser straw. You use it sparingly. The aim is comfort, not waste. The chaff falls lightly from the sack, and the straw covers it. A small act, connected to the morning sorting in the loft, now becomes part of the animal's rest. This is how the day loops back on itself. What you gathered overhead returns below in another form. What you cleared from the path becomes bedding, or removal, or simply cleaner air. The farm rarely moves in straight lines. It circles through use, reuse, feeding, cleaning, storing, and returning, each motion touching another. Evening milking, if it is part of the farm's rhythm, fills the barn with a different quiet. The metallic sound of milk in a pail is steady and intimate. Hands move beneath warm flanks. Animals breathe and chew. The dustman may help, or may simply move around the edges, keeping pathways open, setting tools aside, and carrying what needs carrying. Your loft work has made this hour easier in ways nobody needs to mention. Hay came down cleanly. The path above is ready for another forkful if needed. No loose sack blocks the ladder. No dust cloud followed the feed more than necessary. Such things are noticed mostly by their absence, and absence can be a fine kind of success. When the last feeding is done, you climb once more to the loft for the day's true closing. The air upstairs is dimmer now, but it has the peaceful quality that follows a careful day. You can smell the fresh-cut face of the haystack, the old boards, the faint dampness from weather outside, and the lingering warmth of your own work. The broom waits where you left it. You do not begin again in full. You only check. A hand on the fork, a glance at the chute, a light brush where hay fell during the last feeding. The motions are almost ceremonial, though no one would call them that in the barn. They are simply what you do before leaving a working place to darkness. The gable door is latched. You test it. The latch holds. The window is closed or set as weather allows. The sacks are away from the sill. The box is empty enough for morning. The smaller brush lies on its shelf. You touch the shelf lightly and feel no loose scatter under your fingers. Good enough. Better than good enough. Ready? For a moment you stand under the rafters and listen to the loft settle. The lower barn continues its soft evening sounds, but up here they are muted, like sounds heard through a thick blanket. A strand of hay slips somewhere in the stack and comes to rest. Dust floats in the lamplight or bulb glow, then drifts downward. The day is loosening its hold. We remain with you in that upper quiet, because this is where the dustman's work shows itself most clearly. Not in a shining surface, not in a finished object to display. It shows in a room made ready to be used again, a room that can sleep because hands have passed through it with care. The thought is simple, and it settles softly. You lift the lantern, if lantern there is, and its light moves across the boards. Shadows of broom, fork, and beam lengthen and turn. If there is an electric bulb, you reach for the chain and pause before pulling it, letting your eyes take the last shape of the loft. Either way, the moment before darkness feels wide and quiet. The light goes lower or goes out, and the hayloft becomes smell and memory. You know where everything stands, even when you can no longer see it. The broom by the post, the fork near the beam, the haystack rising along the wall, the chute open and clear. Your hand finds the rail, and you begin to descend, leaving the dust to settle behind you. Below, the barn has entered night. Animals lie or stand quietly, chewing in slow rhythm. Straw rustles only now and then. A door latch catches. A chain gives one last small sound. You move through the lower space, checking, listening, and carrying the calm of the loft into the final round. The dust on your clothes is part of the darkness now, pale only where light touches it. Outside, if you step into the yard, the weather has its own closing. Snow may fall without hurry, covering tracks as gently as dust covers shelves. Rain may have stopped, leaving eaves dripping in a slow count. Summer dusk may hold moths near the house light, while fields breathe out heat. Autumn may sharpen every smell: straw, smoke, wet leaves, and cold earth. You stand a moment between barn and house, not for show, simply because the body pauses after a day of steady use. The barn behind you holds animals, hay, tools, and the cleared loft. The house ahead holds supper's remains, warm air, and the bed that will receive your tired limbs. Over everything lies the same quiet, practical peace. The next day will not be identical, but it will rhyme. This is how quiet work continues. A different corner, a different weather, a different depth of dust near the sill. More hay taken from the stack, another sack mended, another tool wiped, another path swept. The Hayloft Dustmen's days are not copies, though they share the same slow shape. Before sleep, you may still feel the broom's motion in your arms. Some motions stay there after the tool is put away. The shoulder remembers the pull. The wrist remembers the turn. The hand remembers the handle's smooth, worn place. As you lie down, those motions may continue faintly in the body, becoming softer and softer until they are no longer work. only rhythm. And by morning, before words have gathered fully in the mind, the rhythm will be waiting. The Quebec barn will stand in the pale light. The hayloft will hold its stored summer under the roof. Dust will have settled in patient lines and veils. You will tie the cloth, lift the broom, and begin again, not because the work is grand, but because it is yours, and because the day opens gently when the first small task is known. The first task that morning may be the ladder rail, because overnight the damp has made it feel slightly tacky beneath your hand. You rub it with a dry cloth, long strokes from top to bottom, and the wood gives back a faint shine where palms have polished it for years. A little grey dust comes away. The rail feels clearer, easier to trust, and your hand rests on it a moment longer than needed. Then the top landing asks for attention. Boots have carried bits of straw and barn soil up from below, and the grit has gathered where the last rung meets the loft floor. You use the small brush first, then the broom. The sound is close and crisp in the morning air. Dust, grit and straw ends gather together, and the landing becomes a safer place for sleepy feet. This is the dustman's first kindness of the day. Not a kindness spoken aloud, but a kindness built into a surface. Someone climbing with both hands full will not slip on loose chaff. Someone descending in dimness will find the rail dry. You may be that someone. You may not. The work does not ask who benefits before it becomes worth doing. The barn below warms slowly. Animals breathe. Wood settles. A pail rings once, then stops. Outside light gathers behind clouds, and the cracks in the loft wall become pale lines. You sweep toward those lines, not away from them, because light helps you see what the night has left behind. Fine dust near the wall edge, a curl of hay, a small dark seed husk. You bend to pick up the seed husk, turning it between thumb and finger. It may be from clover, weed or grain carried in by accident. You do not study it long. It goes into the sweepings. Yet, the little pause matters. Because the hayloft dustman's eye is trained by such things, and every small object teaches where air, boots, and feed have been. The morning grows with the work. You clear the landing, then the chute, then the short path. Each place receives its own pace. The chute needs care, because feed will pass there soon. The path needs longer strokes, because boots will cross it all day. The corners can wait until light is stronger. This order is not written, but it is steady inside you. When the call for first hay comes, you are ready. The fork lifts the loosened edge of the stack, and the hay opens with a soft, dry sound. Dust falls in a pale curtain before the feed goes down. You wait for the curtain to thin, then turn the fork and let the hay drop through. Below, the animals begin their morning eating, and the loft feels briefly lighter where the feed has left it. The new face of the stack is uneven. You smooth it with the fork, drawing stray stems back into place. A neat hay face sheds less dust into the path. It is easier to cut later. It tells the next worker where to begin. You stand back and look at it, then make one small correction with the fork tip, because the eye knows when a line is nearly right. After feeding, you sweep what fell. The dust is fresh and fragrant, lighter than the older grey in corners. It smells of the inner hay, sweet and a little leafy. You gather it separately at first, because some of the longer pieces can be returned to use. The smallest powder goes into the box. The day's sorting has begun before the sun is fully up. We can hear the old rhythm forming again. Feed, sweep, sort, check, carry. The words are plain, but the body finds calm inside them. The barn is not asking you to solve anything large. It is asking you to answer the next visible need, and then the next, and then the next, until the day has been used well. A shaft of light enters through the cleaned window, clearer than yesterday. It falls on the floor near the shelf and shows a thin layer you might have missed. That is the reward for wiping glass. More light means better seeing. Better seeing means quieter work. You take the broom to that bright patch and move the dust into the open, where it no longer hides. The shelf itself still holds yesterday's order. Lantern, matches, twine, hinge, tray. Each object sits in its place, and this little row of readiness brings a calm satisfaction. You touch the twine, checking that its end is easy to find. It is. You resist the small temptation to fuss further, because enough order is enough, and the day has other corners. The north corner waits. Yesterday's weather left it cool, and now morning light gives you a better chance to look. You crouch near the wall, brush dust aside, and feel the lower board. Dry. Colder than the rest, but dry. The darker patch has not spread. You breathe a little easier, though the feeling is almost too small to name. You sweep the area lightly and let it be. This is how worry is kept gentle. You check what needs checking, take the small action available, and do not carry the whole barn in your chest. The dustman learns limits from the building itself. Some repairs need carpentry, some need weather, some need only a broom and a dry day. Knowing the difference saves strength. Toward the middle of the morning, you take the bent fork to the light. The tine is only slightly out of line, turned by some older load or careless moment. You set the fork across 2 blocks and press with steady pressure, not sudden force. The metal gives a little. You check it by eye. It is not perfect, but it is closer, and close enough for hay. You wipe the tine afterward, clearing old dust from where it meets the shoulder of the fork. Iron has its own smell, faint and cold, especially in morning air. Your glove leaves a dull shine on the worn places. The fork returns to its post with a more balanced look, and the small note held in your mind since yesterday can be released. Another small note replaces it, as always. The broom's binding is loosening near the bristle head. Not badly, but visibly. You set that thought aside for later, perhaps after noon, when light is strong and the feeding rush has passed. A dustman's mind is a shelf of such quiet reminders, each one waiting patiently for the proper hour. You carry the first box of sweepings down, then return with an empty one. The empty box feels almost lively after the full one, light enough to swing slightly if you let it. You do not let it. Habit keeps your movements economical. The loft floor receives the box in its usual spot, near enough to use, far enough not to trip over. Its corners fit the day like an old word. By now the morning has settled fully into work. There is no beginning left, and no ending near. This middle part of the day is broad and useful. You can enter the slower tasks now, the ones that need steady light and no immediate call from below. The broom binding, perhaps. The low shelf by the west wall. The old sacks needing another sorting. You choose the broom, because a dustman depends on his main tool. You sit where light falls across your knees and turn the broom head upward. The binding is twine and wire, tightened once before, now loosened by many strokes against rough boards. Dust lies packed near the bristles. You pick it out with a nail or knife tip, gently, freeing the place where repair must happen. The bristles spread under your hand, stiff and dry. Some are broken shorter than the rest. That is the broom's history, written in wear. You do not need a new one yet. You need to tighten what remains. With twine from the shelf, you wrap the head firmly, guiding the line between bristle and handle, pulling it snug but not so tight that it cuts. The twine rasps against your glove. You tie a knot that can be trusted. Then you test the broom with a few strokes on the floor. It sounds better, more gathered. The bristles move together instead of splaying apart. This repair may last a week, or a month, or only until heavier work begins. But today it is enough. There is quiet pleasure in maintaining the tool that maintains the room. The broom clears dust, and you clear the broom. The loft holds hay, and you keep the loft able to hold it. Each layer supports another, without display. We stay with that thought lightly, because the work itself says it better than any explanation could. The repaired broom gets its first proper use along the west wall. It gathers dust more cleanly now, drawing a finer line from the boards. You feel the difference through the handle. The body always knows when a tool has been brought back into order. It takes less effort to do the same work. and that small easing spreads through the whole hour. At the low shelf, you find a jar with no lid, a folded piece of leather, and a handful of old wooden pegs. Ged brooms passing and pressure. K and presh, to do the same work, and that small easing spreads through the whole hour. At the low shelf, you find a jar with no lid, a folded piece of leather, and a handful of old wooden pegs. The jar is dusty inside, so it cannot hold anything clean unless washed later. You set it aside for the house or workshop, depending on where such things go. The leather is dry at the edges, but supple in the middle. The pegs are sound. Each object receives its quiet judgment. You brush the shelf. Dust drops in a soft sheet. The repaired broom catches what falls to the floor. The shelf's grain appears, rough and splintered near one end. You run a gloved finger there and feel the catch. Another small note. Sand or shave the splinter later before someone reaches in without gloves. The day adds and removes reminders like breathing. A half-asleep listener might drift here, and that is all right. The work continues softly. You are still in the 1940s QUEBEC Hayloft, still moving among hay, wood, cloth, and dust. We are still in the 1940s QUEBEC Hayloft, still moving among hay, wood, cloth, and dust. You set the brush aside, not on the floor, but on the shelf where it belongs. You sweep the small pile created by the beam work into the box. Then you look once more along the path to the ladder, because leaving a clear path before meals has become one of your steady habits. Down the ladder, through the lower barn and into the yard, the day opens around you again. The weather has cleared a little. Light lies on wet boards or snowbanks, and the air smells washed. Your clothes are dusty, your hands tired, but the morning has been used well. You do not need to say this. The body knows. At dinner, the same warmth receives you, though every meal has its own small changes. A different soup, a different angle of light on the table, a new remark about the road, the neighbor, the price of feed, the church bell, the clouds moving from the west. The dustman's mind listens, but part of it remains upstairs with the shelf splinter and the afternoon work still waiting. That is not worry. It is continuity. The work holds its place in you while you rest from it. After food, after tea, after the brief heaviness of sitting, you will return and take up the next task. The farm day is woven from these departures and returns, and each one softens the edge between labor and rest. When you climb back to the loft, the afternoon has a warmer smell than morning. The hay seems sweeter. The boards release a faint resinous scent where sun has touched them. Dust floats lower, heavier, more visible in the calm air. You stand at the top of the ladder and let your eyes travel to the west shelf. The splinter waits exactly where you left it in memory. You take the small knife and a piece of cloth. The knife blade is not sharp enough for fine carving, but sharp enough to shave a rough edge from old wood. You draw it gently along the shelf corner. Pale wood appears beneath the darker surface. The curl falls into your palm, smelling fresh and clean, as if the board still remembers being a tree. You smooth the place with the cloth, then test it with your glove, then with a bare fingertip. No catch remains. The shelf can be used without snagging cloth or skin. Another small note leaves the mind. The knife is wiped and put away. The tiny curl of wood goes into the box with dust, a fresh scent among older smells. Afternoon feeding approaches, so you prepare hay again. The stack face has settled from morning work, and you open it a little lower this time. The fork sinks in. The hay resists. You lean your weight through the handle, then lift. A sheet comes away. Dust and dry leaves fall. You shake, wait, and set the feed near the chute. There is a quiet elegance in doing the same task better because the place has been cared for. The chute is clear, so hay falls cleanly. The path is swept, so your footing is easy. The fork tine is straighter, so the lift feels balanced. The broom is tightened, so cleanup will be lighter. None of these improvements is grand alone, but together they make the afternoon kinder. The call comes and hay goes down. Below, eating begins. You brush the chute, sweep the fall, sort the longer stems, and gather the fine dust. The rhythm is familiar enough now to soften thought. Your mind may wander to the field again, or to the road outside, or to nothing in particular. The body carries the task. A patch of sun rests on the floor near the window. You move the box out of it, because warmth can stir the smell of old sweepings. It is a small thing, perhaps unnecessary, but experience prefers it. The box sits better in shade near the post. You place it there and notice how the repaired broom leans straight beside it. Order is often made from such quiet placements. Later in the afternoon, a neighbor may come by the yard, and voices rise from below. The words are indistinct at first, then clearer when the barn door opens. Weather, roads, a borrowed tool, perhaps talk of a market day or a parish matter. You continue brushing the shelf, not eavesdropping, only hearing human company pass through the work. The loft does not become lonely when voices come and go. It remains itself. Hay absorbs sound. Dust softens the air. The beams hold their long patience overhead. You are part of a farm, a neighborhood, a province, a decade, and yet your immediate world is still the reach of your arm, the brush in your hand, the board under your boots. This closeness is one reason the work suits evening thoughts. It narrows the world without making it small. You do not need to think about every field at once, only the hay in front of you. You do not need to manage every repair today, only the peg, the shelf, the broom, the chute. The mind rests when the next useful action is near. As the neighbor leaves, the lower door closes, and the barn returns to its enclosed sound. You finish the west shelf and sweep the floor below it. The pile is modest, mostly gray dust, wood curls, and a few seed husks. You gather it. The clean shelf now holds only what belongs there. Jar removed, pegs stacked, leather folded, brush returned. Late afternoon stretches. You take a short pause near the gable door, opening it just enough for air. Outside, the weather has settled into a pale, quiet state. If snow fell earlier, it lies fresh on fence rails and wagon tracks. If rain came, it darkens the yard and leaves drops clinging to eaves. If sun has returned, it rests low across the fields. You breathe, and the loft breathes with you. The open door brings in distant sounds. A dog once, far away. A wheel on the road. A crow, perhaps, though the sound comes so faintly it feels more like a mark in the sky than a cry. You close the door before cold or damp can enter too long. The latch catches. The loft turns inward again, and your hand returns to the broom. Evening's first pass begins, around the chute. Along the path, near the ladder, under the shelf. The repaired broom makes good sound, fuller and more even. You can feel the day's maintenance in each stroke. The bristles obey. The dust gathers. The path clears. This is the modest happiness of a tool restored to usefulness. The box fills with the day's final sweepings. You carry it down, empty it, return it. The motions repeat so smoothly they become almost dreamlike. Up and down, warm and dry, lower barn and upper loft, animal breath and a stored hay. The farm is vertical as well as wide, and your day has traveled between its levels again and again. When evening feeding begins, you are ready before the call. The hay is loosened, the chute is brushed. Your footing is clear. You send down the feed in steady forkfuls, each one shaken enough to free the dust. Below, the animals receive it with that slow, tearing chew. The sound rises and folds into the loft's dimness. It is one of the gentlest sounds in the whole day. Afterward, the cleanup is light. A small scatter near the chute. A few leaves caught in a crack. A line of dust where your boot turned. You sweep them all with unhurried strokes. The day has not ended, but its shape is visible now. Morning checks, noon repair, afternoon sorting, evening readiness. The hayloft dustman's hours have passed through your hands and left the room calmer. You look once more to the north corner, because old habits ask for one more glance after weather. It remains dry. The doorsill is clear. The window admits a soft last light. The shelf is safe under the hand. The broom binding holds. The fork stands balanced. The small reminders have been answered one by one, and the mind is less crowded than it was at dawn. Now the loft asks only for closing care. You hang the brush. You set the box square. You fold the spare sack and place it on the raised board. You run your hand over the chute edge, feeling smoothness. You check that no hay lies too near the ladder opening. Each act is brief, but together they make a slow farewell to the day's upper work. The light fades without hurry. The haystack becomes a dark, soft wall. The rafters become long shadows. Dust still moves in the last visible air, though less of it now and more slowly. You stand with one hand on the broom handle, not yet ready to leave, not because anything remains urgent, but because the room has earned a quiet moment. We remain there with you, under the old roof of the Quebec barn, among the scents of dry grass, wood, dust, and animal warmth rising from below. The job is obscure, perhaps, and almost never named in histories, yet here it has filled a whole day with useful motions. You have kept the hay clean, the path open, the tools ready, and the air a little easier. Then you take the broom to its place. The bristles face clear of damp. The handle leans at the right angle. Your hand leaves it slowly, as if ending a handshake with an old companion. The fork stands nearby. The small brush rests on the shelf. The hay knife hangs on its nail. The loft has its arrangement again. You lift the lantern or reach toward the bulb, and the lower barn sounds call you back into the evening. There are still latches to check, animals to glance over, perhaps water to carry or a door to secure. The dustman's loft work is ready to sleep, while the farm's last round continues below. Your boots find the ladder, and your hand finds the rail made cleaner that morning. Down you go, rung by rung, with the smell of hay following you into the warmer air. The lower barn is dim and gentle. Straw lies fresh in the stalls. Animals chew, breathe, and settle. A pail gleams faintly near the wall. Your day has not concluded. It has only moved downward into the last quiet tasks that wait near the floor, the doors, and the slow breathing of the night. The last round below is small and familiar, and your hands move through it as softly as the evening will allow. A latch is pressed until it holds. A pail is turned upside down. A little straw is nudged back from the walking place, and the animals settle with the slow, warm sound of chewing in the dim barn air. Above you, the Quebec Hayloft rests in darkness, with the broom standing where morning will find it, though morning no longer needs to enter this night. You pause near the ladder and look upward, not climbing now, only listening to the room above the beams. The loft has no bright outline from here, only the faint shape of stored hay and rafters, and the dry scent of it comes down gently through the boards. Fine dust is settling there, slower than thought, laying itself over the cleared path, the shelf, the chute edge, and the handle of the fork. It is not a failure of the work. It is only the barn breathing in its sleep. Outside, the yard has gone soft with night. Snow, rain, or summer dark. It does not matter much now, because the day has lowered its voice, and the buildings stand close together. The house window gives a small, steady light. The barn behind you holds warmth, animals, hay, tools, and all the quiet labor of your hands. You close the door with care, and the latch makes one final wooden sound. As you walk back across the yard, the dust on your sleeves is barely visible, though you can still feel the day resting in your shoulders and wrists. The work has grown quiet inside you now, no longer a task, only a rhythm fading toward rest. The loft is still, the broom is still, the hay waits under the dark roof, and there is nothing left to do but let the night hold it all.